Hi, folks. In this video, I'm going to be talking about how factors in astrology are cumulative or effects are cumulative, and we could also refer to this as confluence. So what do these things mean? Well, basically, in any form of divination, you need to see multiple factors, multiple things, multiple placements, what have you, pointing to the same reality, the same kind of basic or fundamental reality. So that means that single factors taken in isolation are not by and large going to have a great track record for producing accuracy in terms of interpretation. So I can't just say, like in this chart, oh, Mars is in the fourth and Mars in the fourth means this, right? To do that is to take Mars completely out of context of the whole chart, which is going to be unique, right? Because Mars in the fourth house means very little. You know, we get some basic significations, of course, that we can use to guide us in our interpretation, but within the context of the whole chart, Mars in the fourth house is just one single factor. And so if we were judging that, would we find other factors that pointed to the same kind of energetic pattern? In terms of practical affairs, right, in terms of actual life events and so on, what we're talking about is things like, you know, we need to see multiple factors pointing toward the reality that could be the person reuniting with their long lost stepfather, or the person losing their grandmother at this time, or the person having a career in this kind of thing, right? Is their career consistent, or are there a lot of breaks and changes in it? We need to see preferably at least three things pointing to that same thing. So let's say it's a career thing. We need to see at least three things pointing toward that same kind of career, you know? And that's what confluence is, right? And I'm making this video because what I notice is a lot of people who practice astrology, and especially people reviving older forms of astrology, right? Ancient Hellenistic and Persian and Indian astrology and stuff like that. They have a hard time with this, in my opinion, or, you know, a select group of people that's large enough for me to want to make this video have a problem with this. People want these single factors to work more often than that. And this is why people argue over zodiacs like sidereal and tropical. This is why people argue over different house systems. This is why people argue over a lot of different things in astrology that are really very superficial when it comes down to it, because if you are seeing repetitions, it doesn't matter what techniques you're using because you're headed in the right direction. So I do really want to emphasize that, again, it's not about, oh, this one thing either worked this one time or didn't work, and therefore it's either great or it's not great. It's all about the context, right? Somebody was talking about how, you know, older authors speak of, like, if you've got multiple planets essentially dignified by sign or exaltation, then that creates a really strong basis for, like, power and success and authority and talent and skill and so on. And the person was saying how, like, they didn't see that in somebody such and such a world leader's chart. And the thing is that, well, that's a discussion for another time, why a world leader wouldn't have these things. It makes perfect sense, but I'll have to do a separate video on that to explain it properly. But in any case, it is just one factor among many. So if you find a chart where a person has lots of essential dignity, you still need to check the more in-depth techniques for assessing what that's going to manifest as. And likewise, if you find a chart where there's no essential dignity, you still want to look and see how the factors are interacting on a deeper level, because that is just one thing, right? If we don't have any repetitions for that essential dignity, then it means very little. If we don't have any, if we have other factors pointing toward power and success in a chart with no essential dignity, right, then the fact that there's no essential dignity or very little essential dignity, it's very unimportant to the broader scope of things, and of course to the more in-depth analysis, you know. So again, there are lots of things that could point to power and success and talent, right? It's not just essential dignity. Likewise, it's not just the other things too. It's not any one of them. So I'm kind of rambling a lot here because I just want to drive this point home. You cannot look at one thing and assume that you understand how it works for all charts and that the technique either works or it doesn't, and blah, blah, blah. You have to look for repetitions. And so we're going to do that here with this transit chart. All right, this is like a hypothetical person. Somebody probably was born at this time in this place just recently. And so I wanted to look a little bit at their relationship stuff. This is kind of a more complex chart for relationships, but it'll sort of bring together what I'm trying to illustrate. So for relationships, generally speaking, we want to look at the seventh house, the Lord of the seventh house, Venus for sure. And then let's say that this is the chart of a man. We'll look at the moon for his spouse, and we'll look at the lot of marriage. There are several ways of calculating that, but the main way I do it is for a man, regardless of day or night. I do it from Saturn to Venus, and I've already calculated that out. So I know it's at about 8 degrees Libra, okay? Again, distance from Saturn to Venus, right? And we subtract it because Venus is behind Saturn in the zodiacal order of things. So it's at 8 degrees Libra. So now we want to check all of these factors and see what brings them together. Well, we've got Mercury with Jupiter in a Jupiter sign, in a Jupiter bound, right? This little fivefold division, Jupiter bound. We have Moon in a Jupiter bound, okay? And we have Saturn and Mars in Jupiter dignities as well. Saturn's in a Jupiter bound. Mars is in a Jupiter sign. And why did I bring those in? Because at approximately 8 degrees Libra, Saturn makes a square to it, right? And Mars is Antisha conjunction at 8 degrees Libra with that lot. So Mars and Saturn are also influencing that lot, okay? But there's a big theme of Jupiter. Jupiter makes a big undertone. We even have lot of fortune and midheaven in Jupiter bounds and lot of fortune in Jupiter exaltation. Not that that's really important for marriage, but that's something we would look at, just raw data, right? We're seeing confluence in that Jupiter is pretty huge in this chart in a multitude of ways. Okay, so we also have Mercury sextile to that bound along with Jupiter, that lot, the lot of marriage, right? So again, we get Mercury and Jupiter. The lot is in a Mercury bound, and Mercury and Jupiter themselves are in the face of Mercury, though it's not listed here, the decadent or face of Mercury. So, okay, so how do we put this together? Well, first off, there's not a ton of confluence here. There's bits and pieces of confluence. I'll just say that right out front, right? And so that tells me that this person's married life is going to be rather varied and different, right? They may be married several times, first of all, because of the influence of the malefics on the lot of marriage, right? But because of the influence of Jupiter on Mercury, the seventh lord, they may also be involved with a lot of relationships, okay? So that's just one quick thing right there. Like, so there's a variety of influences. We're not getting a ton of confluence there, but we're getting all that Jupiter, right? So what would that mean? Well, that would tell me that there's probably going to be a lot of movement in that realm. What do I mean by movement? I mean that, like, even if this person suffers a lot of difficulties in relationship and marriage, right, they're likely to just probably always bounce back from it because of that Jupiter influence, okay? So what do we have next? Well, we have Moon and Venus, both in cadent houses, 6 and 12, which share a lot in common because they're in axis, right? So this gives us confluence for the the Mars influence on the lot of marriage and the Saturn influence on the lot of marriage. Why? Because the 6th house is the joy of Mars. It's a very Martian house. And the 12th house is a very Saturnic house. It is the joy of Saturn. So immediately we are getting confluence for Mars, confluence for Saturn, and confluence again for this Jupiter-Mercury kind of influence, right? So this is a very rare situation actually, where we have 3 very strong influences upon married life. But I think we have another overarching theme which is a bit stronger in terms of confluence, and that is the kind of hardship theme of 6th house, 12th house, and Saturn, Mars aspecting the lot of marriage. Furthermore, Venus is in a sign ruled by Mars, right? And is she aspecting Mars? Not really very closely. We also have Saturn and Mars regarding Venus and the Moon, meaning they make a whole sign aspect configuration. Whereas unfortunately, Jupiter and Mercury, 2 planets that could really help things out, are not aspecting them by whole sign. They are in aversion. So this strengthens some of these significations more, and what we would expect to see here as a major theme in this person's life is like a lot of hardship around women and marriage, assuming they're a heterosexual man like we are here. So a lot of hardship around women and marriage, possibly emotional and sexual betrayal, secrets regarding marriage, possibly disease, the spouse herself being diseased and things like that, or just having to struggle quite a lot, keeping a lot of secrets. And so, so we start to see that really come together there, okay? It doesn't mean that everything's going to be really, really difficult. There's also definitely some good things here, like, again, the Jupiter-Mercury conjunction, because Mercury is that 7th lord. So there are some great influences on the 7th house, but there is also this kind of more malefic sort of theme taking place that's getting, multiple hits. We're getting multiple hits on that with these different techniques. So I hope that kind of demonstrates a bit of what I'm talking about, and I'm not going to go too much deeper. There's much, much more that we could say about this hypothetical person and their married life and so on, but I just wanted to illustrate that confluence theme. And hopefully I have done that. So please hit like, subscribe, and share this video, and check out my website for individualized readings and more. Have a great day.